So this is one of my favorite stories about Ma. This was related by Bhaiji, Chandra Jyotish Roy, who was one of Ma's two principal male disciples. And they had many private conversations together where he received very, very beautiful teachings. And this is, Ma was talking to him about the process of discovering your own nature, but also discovering it as Guru. So finding that inner Guru, right? One day, and this is Bhaiji is relating this story. One day, Mother took a flower in the ashram and was tearing away all the petals, one by one. She said to me, "Many of your samskaras have dropped away, and many more will fall away, like the petals of this flower, till I shall remain as your main prop, just like the only stalk of this flower. Do you understand?" Saying this, she began to laugh. I inquired, "Ma, how can I reach that state?" She replied, "Every day, try to live with this idea. You do not need to do anything else." So she was saying that samskaras are patterns of limitation, limited understanding, limited feeling, limited ways of being in the world. She was saying, well, many of these have already fallen away because he was a very good practitioner and a very great devotee of his guru. She says, but there's more to come, and she's taking them away. She's taking away those petals one by one until only this central stalk remains, and that is his essence nature, right? The source of all nourishment. In this process of waking up, many things are taken away. Many things that we even experience as beautiful. Things that we cared greatly about at one point in our lives. 10 years later, we care nothing about them. And it's very wonderful, painful, profound, magical process, how this happens. And I always say that most of the most profound changes in my life always just kind of snuck up on me. I never anticipated them. I wasn't trying to make them happen. I was just doing my practice. I may have had some fantasies about what fruit I would get, spiritually speaking, but it never really turned out the way that I expected it to. And I can, tell you a couple things that to me were just astounding. I started writing when I was a very little girl, and was one of those little kids, who always had 5 books around her bed at the same time. I was a voracious reader. I read everything from all over the world and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I really, at some point, I just stopped caring about reading. It was a huge surprise. I wasn't looking for that. And then I stopped caring about writing. I mean, I still use my writing because I developed a lot of skill in that area, so I still use that skill a lot in the service of this. But I have no attachment to it anymore. The thing that I was most, my most attached full identity, being a writer, nothing was, I couldn't have been attached to anything more than I was attached to that. And it was this, the source of a lot of joy for me. And it just slipped away, like Ma just peeling a flower off, right? And now I'm like, if I write, I write. If I don't write, I don't write. I don't even think of myself as a writer anymore. I just think of myself as someone who can write well. Because I worked hard at it, right? No mystery there. So these things are very, very surprising when they happen. one time I fell very deeply in love with somebody. And, I was already in my late 30s, so I'd had lots of people I'd been with before that. But this was a particularly passionate love affair. And when it was over, I never had any desire to fall in love ever again. It was like gone. Right. So this is what Ma's talking about. These attachments, they just start to go. And then your whole life, you could view that as a loss, right? Oh. But most of the time when it's happening, it just happens so naturally that, well, at least for me, it happened so naturally. Those things that they barely felt like losses. Other things have felt excruciating. Excruciating. Like my ambition to, have some sort of spiritual community. When I first came to Portland, I had a lot of ambition about forming a spiritual organization and a community. I was going to do it. And it was just what actually happened was just excruciating. And nothing that I wanted to do worked out. I just got stamped on and stamped on and stamped on over and over and over again until I just gave up. And now as I'm about to leave here, at least, leave living here, I know I'll be back to see you guys and teach. When I look back on, my condition 6 years ago when I first arrived here versus how I feel now, so much attachment. I feel like I just left a huge moving van full of baggage in Portland, Oregon. Right? Now I almost feel the opposite. Sometimes I ask Ma in my prayers, Ma, can I just go off on my own and do my practice and, earn the money that I need to live and leave it at that? She says, no, you have to stay and be with people and work with people. That's what she says every time. I mean, I've asked, at least 10 times. But before, when I first got here, I was so filled with self-importance about the mission, of giving the teachings to people. Right? And that's just all got burned out of me through very painful failures, basically. Right? No's, just basically no's. And now, I just feel so completely different. That feeling that I have now is just that all I want to do is know what Ma wants me to do and do it. Except, I still ask her if I can go off and do things on my own, but she always says no. But now I'm asking, I'm not just going off and doing it. It's a huge difference. So sometimes these ways that these petals get peeled back is very natural and soft, and you barely even notice it happening. One day, just that whole blob of karma is gone. And other times, you're just fighting it and fighting it, which is what I was doing. Right? Fighting. I'll tell you one thing that happened when I first got to Portland. Most of you already know this, but I tried to start something like this, where there was satsang based on Ma's teachings, but nobody had ever heard of her. The thing was, I just was thinking so big. I got this yoga studio to agree. They had 2 whole studios to give the whole studio over for this thing that was going to be huge, of course. And I went out and I bought this giant tea kettle. It was. I bought it on eBay. It held 100 cups of tea, I think. And I bought this huge carton of hot cups, which we still have.
They're on the porch.
Yeah. And, I had the 4 students I had. I got them all to come and, man these tables where we were going to serve chai. And, it was hilarious. It was so out of whack with what was actually happening, right? So I ended up donating the tea thing to the Tibet Center here about a year later. So that was just, one of the things. There's a yogini who is associated, she's Tibetan, and I met her because of my association with the Tibet Center. And she does what's called mo, which is divination in the Tibetan style it's like using beads. So my first year, I asked her to do a divination about Jaya Kula, and would it be successful or not? Would it get off? Would it be my giant vision? And she's going. She goes, mediocre, low mediocre. But then she said something really, really beautiful. And she said, when you're trying to help people in samsara, you have to expect obstacles. And I just really took that to heart, right? That the obstacles were just part of the process, which I hadn't really considered that there would be any obstacles. So it was really beautiful.
Let's see what else. I'd be happy to. I was an emissary of Mom.
What's happening?
They're calling Mom.
Oh.
Mom is a
So Ma says the anguish of not having found God is salutary. The anguish that we experience when we wake up enough so that we feel anguish about our feeling of separation from God. We feel anguish about our own clumsiness in finding our own nature. We feel anguish about all the things that we do out of ignorance, and recognizing that they are symbolic of our lack of understanding of our own nature. She says, you wear ornaments because you wish to, and so you have to bear their weight. Yet this weight is fated to fall off. It is something that cannot last. She says everything that we put on, that is all of our samskaras, they're like ornaments. And we bear them. We think we like them, right? But they're weight, and that weight is just fated to fall off. She says to obtain everything by way of losing everything, that is required. To obtain everything by way of losing everything, that is required. So when we think of losing everything, we have a very dime store view of that, or really hokey, spiritual-esque view of that. Like somehow we have to give up these things, like we can't eat meat, we have to go live in a cave. That isn't what she means. Right? She means we have to give up our ignorance. We have to give up our very small pleasures in order to, our attachment to small things, in order to become full of grace, full of God. And we fight that. We fight that. That's what we call our resistance, right? Because at the heart of those attachments is our desire for divine enjoyment. But since we feel cut off for that, we just go for these minor pleasures instead. So we're really, really attached to these minor pleasures in our lives because the state of God consciousness is enjoyment. We're trying to find that, but we're looking for it on a too small a scale. That's the nature of our attachment. That's why we won't give things up. Our pride in some little thing, right? The taste of some little thing, right? Mm-hmm. So all these things have to be lost, but nothing is really lost, because what rushes in is that greater self-expression, that divine enjoyment. I have lost so much, and some of it was very painful. I described the first years I was in Portland as a real dark night of the soul, and it actually was, in a very classic sense. I felt, Ma used to come in my dreams all the time. I felt in constant contact with her. My practice was, blooming with all of these spiritual things happening, extraordinary things happening in my practice. And all of a sudden it was like, boom, nothing. No Ma, I felt cut off. No dreams. Practice felt dry and hard, right? And, I read St. John of the Cross's book about Dark Night of the Soul, and thank God he wrote that, because I think I would have gone crazy if I didn't know about that. And it lasted for years, really. And just in that time, so much was stripped away. But what is now happening is, true surrender. And it's very, very, very sweet. Very sweet. Much sweeter than whatever it was I thought I wanted back then. And I feel that sense of wholeness again, in a much deeper way. So this loss is necessary, and we should try to relate to it as practitioners. Right? That's really what, everybody who's studying with me has some tools to relate to whatever. There's a lot of loss happening in our community right now. There's illness, there's breakups, there's me moving, there's things changing, right? It's kind of a blender at the moment. And so, it's a really, really great time to practice.